Oh, hello. Don't mind me, I'm just, resting, relaxing. Give me a year, I'll be right with you. That was fun for the bit, but I'm boiling, so actually give me a minute. If I don't take this off, I'm gonna panic. Whew. Hello everyone and welcome back to the Neverland Book Club. Today I'd like to discuss the first book I finished reading this year, My Year of Rest and Relaxation by Ottessa Moshfegh. It's been a while since I've dedicated an entire video to one book review, but I thought it fitting with this one. I had a lot of thoughts while reading, I have even more after, so let's get into it. With only a 3.6 star rating on Goodreads, I found this book to be quite polarizing to those who go into the read with certain expectations. However, when I saw this review from the Blvd, I knew Miss Moshfegh was cooking with more than just salt and pepper. Rating it 5 stars, she says, "A distinctly strange book that left me emotionally discombobulated, much like the narrator. The pacing of the story alone is a work of art. Its plot an absolutely maniacal concept that only works because of the dispassionate static in its voice. It doesn't try to understand itself, leaving most of the legwork to the reader, which I appreciated. It's bizarre and bizarrely funny, optimistic while also inconceivably dark." And now, after having read the book myself, I couldn't have written a better, more all-encompassing review. Of course, Blake says it well. And yes, I'm biased. Now, I wouldn't go so far as to slap 5 stars on the cover right away. Instead, I felt as though this book earned each and every star only after having put it down. And that's how you know you've been taken by an author, when you find yourself thinking about the story days after completing its journey. On the other end of the spectrum of reviews, I found a lot of complaints of it being boring, that reading it felt like a chore, and that the narrator pokes fun or makes light of mental health and mental illness, which I actually couldn't disagree more. You must also consider the time at which the story takes place, which is the year 2000, ending with the events of September 11th, 2001. The diet culture of that time, as well as its misunderstanding and dismissal of mental health, even within yourself in a way, because there was nothing more embarrassing and nothing more stylish than a disorder. And this brings me to our nameless protagonist, or I'd rather simply call her a narrator. She's not redeemable, she's not likable, and guess what? She doesn't have to be. At least I didn't think so. Oops. Plenty of readers and writers fixate on the main character. They're given memorable attributes and personality types in order to appeal to a consumer like a one-size-fits-all sweater. But sometimes that's not at all what's right for the story. Not every character needs to be something to wear, but something to gaze upon. After scrolling through review after review, I saw how much hate this narrator collected. Not just for the time readers feel they've wasted reading her story, but the absolute lack of empathy for her predicament. And that is exactly what I wanted to touch on here today. Because I think books like this are meant to teach us something rather than just entertain. I believe they're meant to show us something we rather look away from. It's easy to ignore the pain of the fortunate, to write off their problems as the least they can endure given their place on the ladder of life. But perhaps that says far more about us than it does them. Every human alive feels pain. It's a simple fact of life. Physical, existential, emotional, we can't escape it. And a paper cut to one can equate to the fall of an axe for another. We've all seen men with colds. That is a joke. Okay, I'm terrible when I have the sniffles. So the question I'd like to pose today as a reader is, what does empathy cost us, and who are we willing to spend it on? Now, before we go any further, let's just go over a quick summary. As I've mentioned, the narrator is a nameless young woman, and the story takes place at the turn of the millennium. Living in New York City, she's beautiful, wealthy, recently orphaned, a Columbia graduate, and otherwise set up for what most would consider an enviable life. And yet she's deeply disconnected from her circumstance. Her main motivation throughout the whole story is to sleep. And girl, I get it. But this is an extreme. That's all she wants, not metaphorically, but literally. She believes if she can just sleep for long enough, she can cure this unrelenting dissatisfaction that's just festering within her. And so, with the help of a radically unethical psychiatrist who can't seem to remember one single detail about her, and an ever-growing cocktail of different prescription medications, she commits herself to extended and uninterrupted periods of unconsciousness, experiencing blackouts at times, waking in the most unhinged of places as the story progresses. Her experimental rest is so raw and uncomfortable to witness. It's not some kind of wellness journey or heroic act of self-care. Instead, it's presented with sharp irony and an emotional detachment Moshfegh does well in portraying on the page. The narrator doesn't seek enlightenment or productivity or even a sense of acceptance from her deceased mother. Her goal is simply absence. Her desire is to opt out. However, it never goes any further than that. She doesn't wish to end her own life, but simply be unconscious for it. Now, the characters surrounding her tend to highlight this isolation rather than alleviate it. Most notably, her closest friend Reva, who is also such an interesting and easy to hate character, but we'll get to that in a minute. In a place like New York City, which demands constant participation at a time when women in particular were steeped in diet culture, consumerism, and deep misogyny, the book explores themes of grief, depression, privilege, and autonomy, among others. And though I'm one to love a book covered in purple prose, I found Moshfegh's unsentimental style so easy to digest and so true to the character's voice, which was what I found most fascinating about this character. Her unapologetic ambition for an irredeemable goal. You can say she's boring, she's stupid, she's unhinged, she's pathetic, and yet she tells you time and time again what she wants. She sets out to do something and does it. And by the end of the story, that initiative turns her into a living art piece. Not just within the story, but without. She quite literally shits on the concept of contemporary art and gives rise to something far more shocking. At no point is her pain softened, and you, as the reader, can feel yourself judging her for every poor decision she makes. Every message she leaves her boyfriend, every conversation she has with her friend Reva, every lie she tells her sham of a psychiatrist, every time she wakes up on the subway or being used by a man or simply in a part of town she's not sure how she ended up there. She squanders the advantageous cards life has dealt her, instead throwing them on the floor and pulling the covers up over her head to hide. And we hate her for that. Because we know we'd act differently in her situation. We'd make better choices. We'd appreciate our predicament, our beauty, our wealth. Which brings me to one of the silent characters of the story. Money. Money is everywhere in this book, and yet it's barely acknowledged. She doesn't chase it or fear losing it. It's not a symbol of success or pride. It simply exists within her world, hovering in the background, an enabler. Because I believe if this story was perhaps told from an impoverished narrator rather than someone with wealth, her decisions would garner far more empathy. The tragedy would shift sociologically. If she were poor, sleeping for a year in a closet-sized studio apartment, the story might read as burnout. If she were grateful, this ambition might be received as healing. But she is none of those things. Instead, profoundly indifferent. And it is that indifference which makes her infuriating. We want the money to matter to her because it would give us some kind of framework to understand her through. But it doesn't. Money isn't the villain, nor is it the solution. It's just yet another tool she refuses to engage with meaningfully. Disengaged from everything in her life except this ambition for what I felt was unearned rest. And this was the most difficult part of the reading experience for me, the concept of unearned rest. And I understand this might resonate with others, but it was a deeply personal struggle I had with the narrator, because I am one who simply cannot stop sometimes. At least not without collapsing first, without truly feeling like I've earned the right to stop, to rest. And for someone to just opt out, how dare you? Her project, her year of chemically induced hibernation, it felt like a cheat code. She bypasses all the work therapy is supposed to teach you how to do. All the mud we're told we must trudge through in order to get better, she rejects it all. She goes through zero self-discovery, typically learns no lesson of significance, and chooses oblivion over effort. And I truly hated that. Because for those of us who tie our productivity to our self-worth and refuse to rest unearned, her indifference felt like theft, cutting a line others have been standing in waiting for answers. But I think that was the point, maybe. The narrative doesn't argue the narrator's methods ethical, but it made me question why we are so bothered by one's refusal to suffer correctly, and if that choice to suffer alongside others is what deems one worthy of our empathy. This is seen quite often in the novel on different levels with her friend Reva. Their shallow or fake friendship is better than loneliness in both of their eyes, and despite disliking one another, they keep the other around for a myriad of reasons, be it validation, background noise, what have you. You can see this lack of empathy from Reva herself towards the narrator, but her need for proximity overpowers her distaste. And as with every other person or concept in her life, the narrator reciprocates Reva's friendship with indifference. They're both just close enough to tease the idea of intimacy or emotional connection without ever reaching it. And here's where the price of empathy comes into focus, because I found it slightly easier to empathize with Reva despite her unlikable personality. We're not asked to choose sides, but observe how negligence can be just as malicious as intentional harm, both with others and with one's own self. I mentioned that by the end of the novel, the narrator becomes an art piece. Her year of rest and relaxation upon completion does not culminate in enlightenment, but symbolism. The question at the end of the novel is, did it work? Did her unhinged plan of self-sabotage bear fruit worthy enough for the book's price tag? And what a lot of people found frustrating is that Moshfegh doesn't answer this question outright. I think it's slightly open to interpretation. And in my reading, I think it worked. I think her experiment was a success. Her manic plan to sleep through an entire year, locking herself in an unfurnished apartment, controlled by a man she barely knows, with enough pills to last her as long as she needs, emerging only every 3 or so days to eat, shower, and return to her coma. She survived. She stuck to her plan, made every right move in line with her goals, and felt rested by the end of it. I think the real question isn't did it work, but is she healed? And I would say no, not in any real or conventional sense. And perhaps that's the most honest outcome for this kind of character. In therapy, one of the first questions we're faced with is, what does better even look like to you? What does healed feel like? And do you even want to get better? For our narrator, I'm not convinced she knew the answers to any of these questions before or after her year of rest and relaxation. It's the unsettling truth we're meant to sit with at the end of the novel. What's our price for empathy for others? Yes, but what's the price for ourselves? This book taught me something uncomfortable, and I hated it while reading it, but I appreciated what it became once I was done. Not because I found it comforting, but because I found it refused to. Good books make us cry. Great books make us think. And at the end of my read, I had 3 questions. What makes rest deservable? Who is deserving of both rest and empathy? And what does it cost to give it? If you're still watching this video, you've either read the book and are looking for others who feel the same way you do about its conclusion, or you've heard of it and would like to know if it's worth your time. For the former, please feel free to voice your opinions in the comments down below. For the latter, I'd say yes, if you're asking me. I think this is one of those stories that you don't sit down with to escape reality, but face it unblinkingly. I'd go so far as to say there are elements of fantasy in this, as well as social commentary, of course. As shallow as people feel it may be, I think its depth comes from what you make of it. Will this make it to my 5-star list at the end of the year? I'm not sure yet, to be honest. You'll just have to subscribe and click that bell to find out in a year. All right, that's all I have for you today, dear viewers. Thank you so much for watching. Be sure to like this video whether you like the book or not. I don't always make videos dedicated to one book, but I think I'm gonna start. So if you have any specific titles you'd like to see me review, be sure to put them in the comments down below. Today's shout out goes to Gogoroth 2. Thank you for the compliments on both my sense of humor and my style. I should really try and wear more than just black tops for these videos, but it just matches so well with my overall vibe, you know? And I'm just now realizing you probably meant video style, not fashion style. So I'm gonna take these off. Anywho, I'm off to go take a melatonin and make a sleepy time tea, because that's enough to knock me out for a few days. I'll let you know if I feel better when I wake up. Stay lost, keep reading, get some sleep. Goodbye! Oh, and buy my book. I forgot to mention my book. I have to mention it every time. I wrote a book. Okay, love you, bye.